afternoon, or good morning, everyone, depending on where you are. This is the Roaming Prepper channel. I'm your host, Pete, and thank you once again for joining me on one of my videos. If you haven't watched me before, when we're done, if you'd like to put a like and subscribe, I'd appreciate it. You can put a thumbs down if you want. I made the mistake of telling my regular followers you could put, toilets or poop emojis. And yeah, somebody literally put 20 poop emojis in the comments. So, awesome. Anyway, thanks for joining me. We talk a lot in our community, going to our subject, about being prepared for an event, but I think we're leaving something really important out, and I'd like to talk about that today. Okay, so welcome back, everybody. So, what exactly am I talking about when I say we're leaving something out of our preparedness mentality? We talk a lot about having preparedness, right? We prep for whatever we think may be in our area. And we've talked about that at other videos. I've talked about it also in my book. Understanding your heat map, your threat matrix, understanding what will more likely be your threat. But there's no way to predict, right? The people in North Carolina, for example, did not expect a hurricane to have epic floods and cause landslides because it hasn't happened in 100 years or for 50 years. It's been generations since it's happened. Whereas in Louisiana and Florida, even though Florida got hit with a massive hurricane, I believe it was Milton, they had under 100 deaths so far, thankfully. I mean, any death is tragic, but why? What is the difference? And I think part of it is not just preparing before and preparing for, which we talk about, but then if you make it through whatever horrendousness has happened, we rarely talk about what about after? What do we do after? And I think that's something that we really need to talk about as a community. So I'll give you my thoughts based on my own experiences. Hurricane Harvey, which was my last guard deployment, was actually my eighth hurricane as a civilian, as a person, as a citizen, if you will. So among the things, first thing you do once you get through whatever it is, let's just take a hurricane because that's something everyone can identify with. Hurricane, earthquake, some other catastrophe. The hurricane transpires. The first thing you need to do is make sure, first of all, that it's safe to do anything, right? If you still have 100-mile-an-hour winds, things are still blowing around, it's unsafe. But the first thing you do in your safe area or wherever you are sheltered is to look at your people and check your people. Now, it may just be you and your dog, right? You may be by yourself. You may have your spouse. You may have kids. You may have an extended family all at the house. Whatever your case is, look just not at physical. Check for injuries. Did anyone get a concussion? Is anyone sick? Is anyone lacking meds, blood pressure, diabetes, whatever it may be? Are people physically well? And the reason I start with physically well is because that's usually easier to see because people can verbalize, I don't feel good, or people will be bleeding or have a bruise or an injury, and it can be seen. And you need to mitigate those injuries. So if, for instance, what happened to one of my teammates in the guard who was a nurse, they were trying to evacuate the house. They were in 4 feet of water, and the roof of their one-story collapsed, and a rafter hit her husband on the head, and sent him under the water. And then a bunch of stuff fell on him. And needless to say, he was then injured, and there was a pretty bad injury. Like he wound up in the ER, being observed to get CAT scan and everything in the middle of a hurricane. So check the physical wellness of your people. After you've done that, which is usually obvious, not always easy, but obvious what's going on, check their emotional state. Is anyone panicking? Is anyone freaking out? Is anyone going into shock? Because you can physically go into shock from an injury. I get hit by a car, I go into shock. You can also, because of a psychological effect of an environmental thing, something around you traumatizes you. you could get into a point where your heart rate, your breathing gets so out of whack, you physically put yourself in shock. So these two are tied together, your mental and emotional state, and spiritual as well. So you need to check on everyone, make sure everyone is psychologically okay. They may be upset, they may be angry, they may be sad. These are normal emotions. But if they're at a point where they're non-functional, they're catatonic, they're having some other episode that is not a normal reaction to, oh, we just had a flood, this is terrible. All right, let's start cleaning up. Everyone okay? And someone's in the corner doing this. There's something very wrong. That person may need additional help. So you check your people physically, medically, and then emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. And these are all tied together. You know, my sensei used to tell me, and my dad as well, you have three parts to you: your mind, your body, your spirit. All of those need to be checked into. Moving on from that, the next thing you should do is check your area. Not only check your shelter to make sure it is safe to congregate there still, it is still stable, it doesn't have water coming in, and no snakes in there, whatever the case may be. At this point, you want to look out of your shelter, out of your wherever you are, your house, your bunker, and evaluate the area around you. Is the wind died down? Is there stuff blowing around? Are there contaminants? Are there animals, excuse me, that can cause harm? Are people freaking out? Is there a fire? These are important things to understand. Is your immediate environment, your area, safe? Not just where you're hiding and where you are, but the area immediately around your shelter. You need to understand, are power lines down? Are they still energized? Is there a danger? I can't tell you how many stories I've heard of people who went out to, excuse me, folks, went out to investigate the area after hurricane, were hit by tree limbs, got hit by a car, electrocuted by down lines. One walked in standing water to where a bridge used to be. The bridge was no longer there. They got flopped into a bayou that had rushing water at about 20 feet per minute, 20 feet per second. It was moving. Like if you threw something in, it was gone. And he got dragged down river. We actually even had a kayaker was trying to kayak across where a bridge had been, got caught in the cross current, got flipped, and the kayaker was killed about a quarter mile down the road. Didn't wear a life vest. Of all the things, like they had the kayak and everything, even had the helmet, he forgot the life vest. Understand the area immediately around you. I'm going to talk about area a little more. The next step is to then check your supplies, check your gear, and make sure you have what you think you have. And now that you've checked your area and your shelter, can you get to any other resources? For example, some of us may have preps at the house and preps at location B. It could be a storage shed, it could be somewhere on a hunting lease. Can you get from A to B safely? If you're cut off because the bridge was out or it's flooded, you are now without that resource for a period of time. You need to factor this in, and the sooner you know that, the better. You don't want to assume you can get to it, and then you run out in the shelter, you go to area B and you can't get there. So understand your area, and then check your people, check your area, immediate area, check your supplies and access to those supplies. At the very end of this, now you start trying to gather information. This is where you reach out to your community, your neighbors, your friends, your mag, and they may not all be the same. You might have neighbors you're close to, but maybe only one of them is part of a mag that you guys are coordinating. The rest of your mag members may be in other parts of town. That's okay. We got hit by Harvey. My guard unit, we were talking during our last drill beforehand because it was hurricane season. We said, hey, look, a bunch of us live in Northwest Houston. So we all kind of exchanged addresses and phone numbers. And we're like, okay, so what we'll do if comms go down, we're going to go to Panera on this street because it's on high ground. We knew it and we knew the owner. He was a Navy guy. And we're like, we will congregate there at noon. If comms are up, we'll text and email and call. Everyone's good. We'll go from there. It turned out one of the guys actually got flooded, but he had already bailed out. He checked his area. He found an exit took his gear, took his family, and bailed out because they had an unexpected flooding event in his area, which was unusual. He was already in the new location, so we couldn't get a hold of him right away. Then he texted in and said, "Hey, don't check on my home. It's unsafe. I've left the area." But he was good. He was okay. He just wasn't there anymore. Plans like that. Then also be familiar with radio frequencies. You should have a wind up or a emergency radio that can get weather, that can get AM, get FM, and if you have a Baofeng or something similar that's hacked, local channels, you may even have to scan channels. Just put it on channel scan and listen to what's going on so you know what's going on. You start, don't broadcast, just listen for information and evaluate your area. So again, that's it for this one, folks. But remember, check your people, physically and mentally. Check your immediate area for safety and hazards. Check your gear and equipment and supplies and access to more resources if that's a factor for you. And then check your larger community, get more news, get more information. And at that point, that's when you start the cleanup. That's when you start saying, okay, what do we need to do to try to return to some semblance of normal or some semblance of at least safety and mitigating further damage to property or risk to people? That's it for this one, folks. Look, I hope that was helpful. And again, we don't do enough about talking about these things after an event. So I hope you guys found this helpful. You guys be safe. God bless. Godspeed. I'll see you on the next video.